Hi, I'm Erin. I'm the training facilitator at the Pikes Peak Workforce Center. Thank you for watching this video today. This is part 2 of a 3-part series on how to create a better resume. Today we're going to focus on accomplishments, gaps, and military transition. So let's get started. All right, so critical task number 2. If you missed video 1, you're going to want to watch that. That's critical task number 1. Critical task number 2 is that you need to create accomplishment statements. Accomplishment statements focus on how well you did something, not just what you did. So a duty, for example, would be answer telephones. An accomplishment statement would be answered 300 incoming calls per day in a high volume call center. So I like to look at it as chicken because I like food. So if I walked into Popeyes and I said, I'll take a 1 piece with a biscuit, and for my 1 piece of chicken, they gave me a chicken wing, that would not fill me up, right? That's a duty. An accomplishment statement would be that big juicy chicken breast that they give you, right? That's gonna fill you up. So accomplishment statements tell your unique value that you bring to a company or to a position, and it focuses on what you've accomplished in the past, and therefore the employer can assume you will be able to recreate that same type of success with them. Generally speaking, your accomplishment statements need to be clear, concise, short, and specific. I'll say that a few more times as we go through this. So when you're writing your accomplishment statements, one of the first things is to use unique action verbs. So unique meaning do not use the same verb over and over. The second thing that will make me hand a person their resume back is if it's using the same word. Manage, 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 manage. Ugh, I'm bored. Take this back, right? So unique action verbs. Now, we say past tense. It's not necessarily that you have to use past tense, but you have to stick with one tense, if you will. So don't use some present and some past in your resume. Pick one or the other. The big thing with verbs is that they take ownership. Right? So you don't want to use what we call passive language. Passive language, let me give you 2 examples. One would be responsible for. Now, responsible for doesn't necessarily mean that you've done it or that you did it in the way that it was intended to be done. So let me give you an example. Let's say the job posting is asking for somebody who knows how to create spreadsheets. Well, maybe in your last position when you got hired, your job description said you were responsible for creating spreadsheets. But when you got on the job and the whole time you were there, the spreadsheets had already been created. All you did was plug and play the information. So if you put on your resume responsible for creating spreadsheets, doesn't mean you've done it. And the problem could then be when the new company hires you and they say, here, create a spreadsheet, and you're thinking, uh-oh, I've never done this before, right? You've never had to do that. So it doesn't mean you've done it. It also doesn't mean you've done it in the way that it was intended to be done. So I'm going to tell a story about myself real quick. Oh gosh, this was about 20 years ago. I walked into work one morning and my supervisor on shift said, hey, Erin, can you go up front and laminate this document? I said, sure. I'm walking up to the front office and I'm thinking, I've never laminated anything, but I have a college degree. I'm sure I could figure this out. So I walk up there, I find the laminating machine, I'm looking all over, and I guess I was taking a long time because the supervisor called me up and she said, what is taking you so long? And I said, I can't find the laminating sheets anywhere. So she comes walking up and she's looking too, and she can't find them, which I think is an important fact because I'm vertically challenged, which you cannot tell on video. She had a good 5 inches on me and she couldn't find the laminating sheets either. So we found these like plastic sheet protectors and we said, oh, maybe that's what you use. So we put the document in the plastic sheet protector. We fed it through the laminating machine. It started to glow. We were like, oh, that's pretty. And then it started to smoke. And we were like, oh, that is not what it's supposed to do, I'm pretty sure. So if I put in my resume responsible for laminating documents, keep in mind I broke the laminating machine, right? So I didn't do it the way it was intended to be done. The other passive language that you want to stay away from is the phrase ability to. Don't use ability to, because I think I have the ability to do all sorts of things. Doesn't mean I've necessarily done it. I have the ability to do a backflip. I'd probably hurt myself if I tried, right? So stay away from the passive language. Stick with verbs because those take ownership. All right. Another thing is, as often as possible, you want to quantify your accomplishment statements. And don't do what they taught you in school. I don't want you to write out the word 3 or type it out, I guess. The word 3 or dollars or percentage. I want you to use the numbers and symbols. Why would I want you to use the numbers and symbols? Well, because they stand out. They grab the attention of the person reading the resume. So as often as possible, you want to quantify. And please keep in mind that you can't quantify everything, right? So as often as possible, quantify. Use bullet points, not sentences, and not paragraphs. That's the first thing that'll make me hand a person their resume back, is if it's paragraphs. I don't have time to read this. The beautiful thing about bullet points is it makes it very easy for a person to skim your resume. And let's be real, that's what companies are doing. Even if they give you a whopping minute glance of your resume, they're scanning it, they're skimming it, they're not reading it. So a bullet point makes it very easy for them to jump from one statement to the next. Now, generally speaking, again, keeping in mind, clear, concise, short, and specific. Your bullet points you don't want your bullet points to be longer than 2 lines, generally speaking. If out of 15 bullet points, let's say you have 2 that go over 2 lines, that's okay. But also, these are not complete sentences. I'm not saying I managed a team of 25 trainers in a high volume. I'm not saying that. So it's not a complete sentence. You do not need to put punctuation at the end, all right? Also, be sure to include any relevant experience or accomplishments that you gain from something other than a paid job. So maybe you have a relevant accomplishment that you got from an internship or volunteerism or a classroom project that you worked on. If it's relevant to the job and you've done it outside of the home, it absolutely belongs in your resume. And again, clear, concise, short, and specific. Now, when you're writing your accomplishment statements, there's 2 different formulas. The first formula is what we call the STAR formula. What was the situation? I've also heard this called problem or challenge. What was the task at hand? What was the action that you took? And what was the result of your efforts? So if we look at this example, this company was experiencing a lot of complaints because the software package was difficult to install and the instructions were difficult to understand. Now, I've never put together IKEA furniture, but I've heard stories about it, so I view this as like it's the technology version of IKEA furniture, all right? The task at hand was to reduce the customer complaints. Now, that could be that your boss told you, I need you to reduce these customer complaints. Or on the flip side, it could be that you were handling all the customer complaints, and so you proactively decided there's something that we can do to fix this so that we don't have all these complaints. The actions that were taken, so maybe you collaborated with research and development. You developed a hotline to handle all of those customer complaints. You implemented a new software tracking program to track those complaints. And the result was a reduction in customer complaints. Now, this is the formula. Please understand, because again, clear, concise, short, and specific. So please understand, I'm not saying this is your accomplishment statement. This is meant to help you write an accomplishment statement, because so often when I talk to people, they say, I don't know, I just did my job. They have a hard time recognizing that they actually did a great job, that they actually accomplished something. So out of that formula, we can have either one or both of these examples of an accomplishment statement. Decrease customer complaints by 75% monthly by initiating design of a new user-friendly installation package. That's an awesome one. That's what we call a hard accomplishment statement, because we can actually quantify that. We know the 75%. Another option, this is what we call a soft accomplishment statement. In other words, I can't quantify, I don't know the numbers. Implement a new customer hotline and software application, resulting in increased customer satisfaction and timely resolution of customer complaints. All right, either one of those could work, and truly you could put both of those in there, but notice how that was born of the same exact formula. The second formula is what we call the RSS formula, because let's be real, not everything on the job is a problem, a challenge, or a situation. Right? So this would be for those more everyday or maybe weekly or monthly tasks that you had to do, but it wasn't a problem. What was the role that you played at the company? The second R, what was the responsibility that you had? And S, what were the steps that it took to get there? So if we look at this example, the role is a medical receptionist. The responsibility, well, we know medical receptionists call and schedule, or they schedule appointments. So if we look at the steps for that, they didn't just schedule appointments. What all went into that? So it was a 5-doctor practice. These doctors somehow agreed that they wanted appointment slots every 15 minutes throughout these particular hours of the day. So you can do some calculations. And you can look at this and you can then create an accomplishment statement that would say either scheduled 150 appointment slots per day in a 5-doctor practice or scheduled 750 appointment slots per week in a 5-doctor practice. So do you guys get that this is a chicken breast, not a chicken wing, right? This is meteor, and I don't mean METEOR. I don't mean the scientific way. I mean the food way. All right, this is a meteor statement. Now, some of you might be thinking, Erin, I don't know the exact numbers, so I can't quantify, and I don't want you to give up quite that easily. What I always suggest is pretend you're hooked up to a polygraph test, AKA a lie detector. If you were hooked up to a lie detector test and they were to say, Erin, did you train 750 people a week? If I said yes, that needle is going to jump all over the place because I know in my gut that that's not true, right? So you have to find a gut check comfortable number for you. So my second position at the Pikes Peak Workforce Center, I was a career counselor. And within 2 months of taking over the career counselor position, my caseload had grown to over 160. Now, how far over 160? I don't remember because I was just a little bit busy, right? It very well could have been 168. It very well could have been 175. It could have been 182. I know it wasn't 200. I feel gut check comfortable saying 160 plus. And in doing so, by managing such a large caseload, I actually saved our organization over $80,000 a year. Again, gut check comfortable because I know it was higher. So in a resume that I have for case management, I have an accomplishment statement that says manage caseload of 160 plus, resulting in organizational savings of over $80,000 a year. How powerful is that statement to a company? And they could assume that I would be able to recreate that same success in their position. All right, so let's look at some ideas here, and you tell me which one you like better. Do you like increased territory revenues, or do you like increased territory revenues from $3 million to $5.3 million over a 3-year period? I hope you liked number 2 better, right? That is meteor. If we look at the second one, reduced office expenses or reduced office expenses by 13% in the first year on the job. I hope you like the second one better. Now, quick question, how much did they save their company? I want you in your head to come up with a number. How much did they save their company? Now you might be thinking, Erin, I don't know, it's 13%. We actually truly helped someone write this accomplishment statement, and they helped their company save, drum roll, $26. Woo! Can you imagine if you put that on your resume? Reduced office expenses by $26 in the first year on the job. Whoop-de-doo, right? That's not super exciting. The overall office budget was $200. So 13% sounds way better than $26, right? Sometimes you might need to look at a percentage as opposed to a hard number. I've seen people that'll bring in their resume and they'll say they managed 3 people. That in and of itself does not sound that exciting. But maybe 3 people was 20% of the workforce. You supervise 20% of the workforce. Right? So keep that in mind. Now, also on this example, I love to go into this because people are tempted to give all the details of how. I mean, you've written out this formula, right? The STAR formula. So you've got all these actions that you took. And so people are often, they're tempted to give all the details how. I don't want you to do that. Again, clear, concise, short, and specific. But also when you just say, this is how awesome I am, but you don't tell them all the ways how, guess what? They're going to have to call you in for an interview to find that out, right? So that's an amazing thing. Then when you get called in for an interview, if they happen to ask about this particular accomplishment statement, 99.9% of employers aren't going to say, how much was it? They're going to say, how'd you do it? And that's when you can go into how. So you say, well, the person before me was stealing all the Post-it notes, and I just stopped. No, I'm just joking. You would never say that. That's negative. No, you would say, we switched to a paperless process. We switched office supply vendors, whatever the case may be. So then you can lay out all of the details for them there. Okay, let's look at another example. Which statement do you like better? Chaired and coordinated national conference or chaired and coordinated national conference, increasing registration by 25%. I hope you said number 2. So could you have done this volunteering for the Humane Society, for example? Absolutely. Remember, if it's relevant to the job you're applying to and you've done it outside of the home, it absolutely belongs in your resume. Okay, last example. I'm going to put this up. I'm not going to read it for you. I want you to take a second to read through this, and you tell me which statement you like better, A, B, C, or D. All right, so out of those, C is the strongest accomplishment statement. I often have people say D, but what I want you to notice is that the biggest difference between those two is that C uses the number 3 and D types out the word 3. And remember, we want to use those numbers and symbols as much as possible when we're quantifying. All right, so here's the thing about accomplishment statements. I happen to think that writing accomplishment statements is the most difficult part of writing your resume. Again, we tend to undersell ourselves, so we're like, I don't know, I just did my job. You have to brag about yourself. In your job search, you have to learn to brag about yourself, and it can be very uncomfortable for people to say how awesome they are, right? So that's part of what makes it more difficult. Also, if you're under pressure, it makes it more difficult. So what I don't want you to do is wait until you have a job posting and now you need to write 15 different accomplishment statements. That's going to burn you out if you try to do that all in one day. So what I suggest you do is that for every day that you job search, you agree with yourself, I will write 1 or maybe 2 accomplishment statements per day. I'll build those into either my master resume or my skeleton resumes for particular occupations. And that way they're there. The core of the statement is there. Now, as you're tailoring and toning down your resume, you may need to change out some of the verbs based on what they used in their job posting, but the core of the statement is there. That'll make it much easier on you. All right? So that's writing accomplishment statements. Have fun with that. All right? The next thing that we want to talk about today is gaps in work history. So if you have a gap in your work history that's longer than 3 months, we want to have you build activities that demonstrate motivation, initiative, and discipline right into the work history section of your resume. Now, back when we first hit the recession, we know that employers, if they see a gap of longer than 3 months, they start to wonder, what were you doing during your time off? And employers aren't real big on giving you the benefit of the doubt, so they just assume you were sitting on your butt watching Judge Judy. I don't even know if Judge Judy is still on. Watching Judge Judy eating bonbons all day. Now, if that's accurate, I hope you had a good time. If not, though, you want to build activities that demonstrate motivation, initiative, and discipline into the work history section of your resume. These things do not have to be paid, nor do they have to be relevant to the job that you're applying to, because you're not using these to say, this makes me qualified for your position. You're just answering the question, what was I doing while I was out of work? So here are some great examples. Independent contracting or consulting. You pick one or the other, all right? This could work for a lot of different things. So let's say you're an IT person. You're a computer genius. Well, I happen to know IT people, and guess what happens? Whenever their friends or family members, when their computers are acting up, they call that IT person. And generally speaking, the IT person will help them out because you're a good person, right? So the IT person will help them out. That could be independent contracting or consulting. I guarantee you that when I win the lottery, notice I said when, not if. When I win the lottery, I'm no longer going to be working at the workforce center. And it's not because I don't love what I do, but it's because I really think my best schedule would be like Tuesday through Thursday, like 10:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. with a 1-hour lunch break. Does that sound good to the rest of you? I think that sounds amazing. So when I win the lottery, I'm not going to be working at the workforce center, but I guarantee I'm still going to have family members and friends of family and family of friends who are going to call me and they're going to say, hey, Erin, can you look at my resume? Hey, Erin, how should I answer this question during an interview? Hey, Erin, what's this LinkedIn thing and should I be using it? And I'm going to help them because I'm a good person. That would be independent contracting or consulting. You could use this for a lot of different things. Let's say you're an accountant by day, right? That's your trade, or that's your occupation, but you also happen to be really good at working on cars. So while you're out of work, you're doing people's oil changes and brakes and all those types of things. They don't have to pay you for it, right? You're just doing it out of the goodness of your heart, or maybe they do pay you, maybe with beer, I don't know. But maybe they pay you for it. And so that's independent contracting or consulting. Remember, it doesn't have to be relevant, doesn't have to be paid. The second idea is temporary, part-time, or seasonal work. Now, generally speaking, I don't put on my resume that I'm a full-time training facilitator, so why in the world would you put part-time, temporary, or seasonal? If you take one of those types of jobs that's not normally what you do, this is a great way to calm an employer's concerns about where are you going, you're all over the place. When we hit the recession, we saw a lot of engineers that lost their jobs that ended up going for whatever reason to Home Depot and Lowe's. Well, if they're applying for engineering positions and their current position says cashier at Lowe's, employers tend to look at that and go, what is this person doing? They don't have any clue what they want to do. By saying temporary employee or seasonal employee or part-time employee at Lowe's, for whatever reason in the employer's mind, they understand that that's survival, right? So if you take a survival job, and survival could mean, hey, I just need some money coming in. Survival could be, I hear this one a lot, especially for men. My wife told me if I don't get out of the house, she's gonna kill me, right? Or it could be a hobby job. Maybe this is your favorite store, you want the discount. Whatever the case may be, if you take a temporary, part-time, or seasonal job that's not normally what you do. Now, if you happen to take a temporary, part-time, or seasonal job that is what you normally do, then what I want you to do is still use the job title. For example, manufacturing is one of those industries that tends to use a lot of temp to hire types of positions. So if I'm in a temporary position as a manufacturing operator, and I'm applying for manufacturing operator positions, please do not put temporary employee, put manufacturing operator, because it paints the picture that you're doing the same type of work. Now, when you list the company that you were doing that through, so let's say ABC Staffing Agency, they're going to assume that was a temporary job. All right, so that's another example. Being a volunteer. Volunteering increases your chances of finding employment by 27%. That's humongous. So being a volunteer, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about our volunteer example in just a moment. A student, being a student, you can take free online college and university courses through a lot of different areas, like Udemy will post some of those, Coursera will post some of those. So you can look for opportunities to take free online classes, or maybe you're taking classes that you pay for. They could be online, they could be in person. Let's say, for example, that I decide that I want to be able to take my daughter's graduation pictures. Well, I have to tell you guys, I take the most vanilla pictures in the world. So if I decide to go take a photography class at Pikes Peak Community College, I'm a student. I'm not working towards a degree in photography, and photography has nothing to do with my occupation as a trainer, but nonetheless, I'm a student. So that's another option. Finally, personal sabbatical. I would list personal sabbatical if I took time off to raise my kids, or if I took time off to take care of an elderly or dependent family member. I could use personal sabbatical if I retired, because you don't want to say retired, that makes you sound old. I could use personal sabbatical if I had my own health concern, and now I'm coming back into the workforce. Now let's talk about this personal sabbatical a little bit more, because out of all of these gap fillers, this one will breed the most curiosity in the mind of the employer. So here's something you need to understand. Employers are not allowed to ask certain types of personal questions during interviews. They cannot ask, do you have kids, or are you planning to have kids? Are you married? Are you single? Are you gay? Are you straight? They're not allowed to ask these types of things. But if you introduce the information, it becomes fair game. So follow me on this. Let's say I'm in an interview and they say, oh, Erin, I see you listed personal sabbatical. What can you tell me about that? Well, I took time off to raise my kids. They're both in school now, so I figured it was a great chance to jump back into the workforce. I didn't want to be gone too long and risk my skills becoming irrelevant. That sounds positive, right? And they might come back with, oh, that's awesome. How old are your kids? Now, at this point, like any parent, I think I'm now bonding with this person on the whole parenting thing. So I go, oh, they're 6 and they're 8. Well, what happens to 6 and 8-year-olds? They get sick. There's teacher and service days. There's snow days, snow delays. There's winter break, spring break, fall break, Christmas break. I don't know. There's so many breaks nowadays that we didn't get as kids. All of these things that take you away from work, right? And you introduced the information. Let's give another example. Let's say I put personal sabbatical and they ask me about it and I say, well, I was battling breast cancer. I'm happy to say I'm 5 years cancer free. I'd want to shout that from the rooftops too. But in their heads, they're going to start thinking, guess who's going to be sick? Guess who's raising our insurance premiums? Guess who's getting cancer again? So understand, you want to be able to answer this question without giving them information that can be used against you in a court of hiring. So if they ask this question, I'm going to say something along the lines of, there was a personal situation that needed attention. It has since been resolved, and it will in no way interfere with my ability to perform the duties of this job. Thank you. Yes, that was good. Notice, I answered the question because it would seem rude if you were like, I don't want to answer that question. So I answered the question, but I did not give them any personal information. All right, let's look at some examples here. So you can see that we have the gap fillers, personal sabbatical, student volunteer. We have those built right into where the gap exists in the work history. That's the first thing I want to point out. The second thing I want to point out is that there's no dates for these. The only date that you would actually want to list for a gap filler would be if it's that temporary, seasonal, or part-time job, and that's because it needs to look consistent with other paid jobs. Other than that, notice there are no dates for these. So between those years of 2006 and 2008, when I was a student and a volunteer, maybe I was just doing that the last 6 months. They don't know that, right? Also, let's look at the volunteer example. This person was volunteering at the Colorado Springs Heart Association. I don't know any company who's going to look at that and go, oh, not another one of those heart people. They're so obnoxious. I don't want to hire one of them. But what if you choose to volunteer somewhere where there's some social stigma attached? So I'm going to give you 2 examples in the Colorado Springs community that are polar opposites. Planned Parenthood, focus on the family. If you choose to volunteer at either one of those places, just the name itself has a stigma attached. So in that instance, rather than saying where you volunteered, you might want to say in what capacity. Volunteer receptionist, volunteer family event coordinator. Now you also want to think about, if they were to ask me about this in an interview, how would I answer? Because I still may not want to say the name of where I volunteered. So if they say, oh, I see you volunteered as a receptionist, where were you doing that? I might say, at a women's health center. Oh, I see you were volunteering as a family event coordinator. Where were you doing that? At a faith-based family center. So be prepared to answer questions about these should they come up. Also keep in mind, you don't need to put every single gap filler that you did. Maybe while I was out of work, I was a stay-at-home mom, so I've got the personal sabbatical. I also did some volunteerism during those years. I was also a student during those years. I don't have to put all 3 of those. I can put 1 or 2 that I feel the most comfortable answering to during an interview. All right, so those are your gap fillers. Finally, let's talk about military to civilian transition. It's very important in our community, especially in Colorado Springs, because we have so many military installations. Employers really like to hire veterans. So you want to get your veteran status on your resume. Now, the first place that you're going to put it is going to be in the summary section. We'll talk about that more on part 3. So in the summary section, you're going to put something along the lines of honorably discharged from whatever branch. You don't want to go into a lot of details here. You don't want to say medically discharged from. You don't want to say retired from. You don't want to say honorably discharged from the U.S. Army after serving in Operation Iraqi Freedom. You don't want to do that because any of those could lead to some concerns on their part. Now, if you were truly not honorably discharged or not able to claim honorable discharge status, then what you would put is just veteran of U.S. Army. Also, I want to mention, don't say honorably discharged from the U.S. Army after 25 years. That could make you sound old, even though you could be retired from the U.S. Army at like 42, 43 years old. But it's going to make you sound old just by saying the 25 years. If your military work experience also happens to fall within the last 10 to 15 years, it is also going to go into your work history section. When you're talking about what you did in the military, some key things here. Make sure you speak in civilian terms. So for example, if I say I commanded a brigade or a platoon, that's very militaristic, right? I need to speak in civilian terms. So I might say I supervised or directed a team or a department or something along those lines. That sounds more civilianized, is what I like to say. Another thing, eliminate jargon and acronyms. I think that everything in the military is an acronym. When I actually started at the Workforce Center, I was an administrative assistant for a military spouses grant. One of the first things they gave me was about a 20-page document stapled with military acronyms. And I was like, what in the world am I supposed to do with all of these, right? So you have to eliminate the jargon and the acronyms. Let me give you an example. Let's say in the military, you worked in warehousing and logistics, and you're looking for the same type of work in the civilian field. Well, in the military, they use a very specific computerized inventory system the rest of the world doesn't have access to. And there's an acronym for it. Somebody told me what it is. I can't remember, so I made up my own. It's called SARS. So here's the thing. SARS is also a deadly disease. So if I put in my resume, maintain inventory of 100,000 plus items daily using SARS, a civilian employer might be like, is this a really nice way to say she was a hit person, right? I don't know. So I have to eliminate the jargon and acronym. So I'm going to say, maintain inventory of 100,000 plus items daily using computerized inventory system. That was the function. Also, because we are in a community that supports the military so much, you might be applying to a position that supports the military, so they could be looking for either one. So then you have to do what I call double speak. So you have to say, maintain inventory of 100,000 plus items daily using computerized inventory system. That is the civilian side. Then you're going to put comma. Anytime that you use an acronym in your resume, the first time you have to spell it out. Systematic Automatic Renewal Software. Put in parentheses SARS, and later you can use SARS. All right? That idea can actually carry over into other occupations. So let's say, for example, manufacturing. Well, there could be 10 different pieces of equipment that do the exact same photolithography processing of a microchip. 10 different pieces of equipment. Unless the job posting says we're looking for someone with experience using the PL5000, I might not want to use that specific technology. I might want to say process 5,000 items daily using photolithography machinery, for example. That would be kind of removing the jargon or the acronym. All right. You're still going to use the STAR or the RSS formula to help you build those accomplishment statements. And make sure that you include what I like to refer to especially as essential skills. You might also have heard them called soft skills before. Let's be real, everything in the military does not translate over to the civilian world. If you were in artillery in the military, I can't tell you the last time I saw a job posting for artillery in the civilian world. So keep in mind that in the military, you get a lot of other amazing essential skills, things like report writing, communication, teamwork, leadership. These are things that you should still write accomplishment statements for and include into your resume. Now, once you're done writing your military experience, ask a non-military person to review it. It cannot be your spouse because your spouse knows all the lingo, right? So it cannot be your spouse. Ask a totally non-military person to review it, and if they look at it and they go, huh, it may still be too military, right? For assistance, you can contact your local workforce center and ask to speak with a vet rep, or there are some websites listed here where you can do a military to civilian kind of translation. Now, on the ONET website, for example, there's what they call a military crosswalk. And I remember when I was a career counselor, I was seeing walk-ins one morning. It was first thing in the morning. This gentleman walked in. He said, I just got out of the military. I'm freaking out. I haven't found a job yet. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. Thank you for serving. How long ago did you get out? And he said 2 days. And I was like, what? And I thought, stop freaking out. First of all, if I were ever to run for office, you guys should vote for me, because I happen to think that anybody who successfully gets out of the military should get like a vacation to somewhere amazing in this world, right? In addition to using any of these websites to help you translate your military experience into civilian terms, please contact your local workforce center and find out if they have veteran employment specialists on staff that would be able to help you. In the Colorado Springs region, we have a lot of veteran employment specialists, and they love to help you translate your military experience into the civilian world. Those are all of our topics for today. Please join me for video number 3. We're going to talk about formats, formatting, and cover letters. Thank you for joining me today. Bye.